What is important around burnout is to keep in mind a couple of things. First, that burnout can go hand in hand with engagement. And this is very common in our industry. This is very common to find people surprised because they felt that they used to love the job they were doing. And then one day, burnout knocked the door. So what happened? What happened to me? I used to love this thing. And now I'm just considering to quit and to open a bar in the beach. So what happened to that? So, and the problem there is that burnout can go hand in hand with work engagement. So don't fail in the trap of only watching how excited I am about my own job, because even in those situations, if we don't manage our burnout risk well, we can go down into the direction of burnout.
Hello, friends and family. My name is jjruescas. I am the host of Optimizándome, or Optimizing Me in English, the show where we invite top performers from different industries to learn from their stories, their successes, their failures, and mostly to learn from their mindset. Our guest today is the founder and CEO of Yerbo, a company on a mission to end burnout in the tech industry. Forbes recognized him as one of the 30 most promising Argentinians for the way that he uses data to solve business challenges. He and his team are democratizing an area that is rarely taken seriously in business, and that is science-based well-being management. They take years and years of research and transform them into tangible practices that get applied to companies that want to deal with burnout in a proactive way. I'm personally super excited about this conversation because I have experienced burnout myself in the past, and I've seen older friends and colleagues struggling with this too. At that time, we didn't know that there were smart ways to deal with burnout and to prevent it. And our guest today is going to reveal how. Without further ado, let me introduce you to Marcos Sponton. Hey Marcos, how is it going?
Hi JJ. Thank you for inviting me. How are you? I'm speaking from Argentina right now. We're in the middle of the winter, so enjoying the winter. I'm very happy to be speaking with you today.
Nice. Thank you. Thank you so much, Marcos. I know that as a CEO of Yerbo, you may be having lots of things to do, and the mission that you guys have is fantastic. So let's start with who's Marcos Sponton and what is Yerbo?
Okay. Well, Marcos Sponton is a guy, a father, husband, a friend. I hope so. And the founder and CEO of Yerbo, which is my second company. The last one was acquired by MercadoLibre. We spoke a little bit about it on our emails before. And that company was acquired, and at the moment of acquisition, it was the largest machine learning solutions provider here in Latin America. But even when that was a very important thing to achieve, from my perspective, the real outlier of that company was that at the moment of the acquisition, we had no more than 4% of annual employee turnover. And that was mainly because I love people from HR and people departments, but that was mainly because we threw to the garbage the playbook on how to lead the well-being of people, and we brought science to learn how to do that in a way that felt like natural and impactful for tech teams. So after that experience, we decided, okay, there is something to do here, and we can do it at scale. That's how Yerbo born, That's our initial motivation to start working on Yerbo was beginning. So we created a proof of concept that some of you might know, which is called the Burnout Index, which became the largest data set of burnout in the world. So we went into that direction, and today, summarizing, we have customers with the likes of GitLab or Nubank here in Latin America, using Yerbo to deliver resources for the middle managers and individual contributors to prevent and manage their mental well-being,
Hmm. So let's start from the point of before Yerbo. In the
Okay.
previous company that you guys had. How did you realize that? How did you get in the first place to the 4% turnover? Because I bet that it did not start like that. There may have been something
Hmm.
else going on there.
Hmm. Well, to be honest, there is not a recipe like a formula that everyone can apply on my perspective. Uh, the I think that the most important thing was that we were convinced, and that wasn't a responsibility of our HR department. That was a responsibility
Mm.
we had as co-founders. I mean, that was one of the main reasons of that company was that we were really looking for to feel proud not only on what we are building but also on how we are doing that. We were working hard side by side with people, so we wanted to feel that we can do really big things without burning out. So what I'm trying to say here is that that was one of our top three priorities. Even when we were creating a business, we were convinced that businesses can be created without burning out people with mental well-being. They can go hand in hand, and they were not like there is no need to conceive high performance like a trade-off of mental well-being. So once we
Mm.
were really convinced on that, we discussed almost every day on how to improve that relationship between performance and well-being, at almost every scale.
Hmm.
Of course, there some things that I learned over the time that at some point weren't like normal. If you compare with other companies, were that there is like this research trying to summarize how leadership deal with their different companies. If you summarize or if you categorize in two different emotions, you're going to see that there are fear-driven models of management and trust-driven models of management. So, and we were like truly believers of trust is the main component of the emotional relationship and then in a team that want to achieve high performance without burning out. So, given that we were living into that situation, we were living our own vision in terms of creating a company centered around trust. It was very common to receive almost any feedback coming from any place in the organization about this is impacting my mental well-being, and I can do what I do, and I can do my own best effort if I can solve this one problem. Because if I can solve this one, which is it can you can see that this is pretty small, but it is not, because if you don't trust 100% in your people, most likely thing is that you are going to start looking for top-down solutions because you consider that you know better how your people is going to be in a better situations than themselves. But if you trust them, you are really open to speak about mental well-being with them. You don't believe that this is going to backfire your business, So just to summarize an answer to your response, I think that the most important things that we did with that company was to have a mindset from the very beginning, really aligned to bring mental well-being to the team. Is that
That makes
fair to
sense.
you? Does it make sense?
That makes sense. And now that leads me into another question, but we're going to go back into what was the name of this previous company?
Machinalis.
Machinalis, that was sold
Machinalis.
to
Okay.
MercadoLibre. Correct.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
we're gonna put a pin on Machinalis because the story there is very interesting. Now, Marcos, help us please to identify or define what is burnout, especially for
Okay.
knowledge workers.
Okay. Well, burnout it's something. It's a syndrome today that is essentially the result of prolonged exposure to stress in the workplace that is characterized by four different dimensions. You're going to see a three model, but we know that you can use a four dimensions categories to explain it with a better psychometric properties. That exposure to stress is going to generate four different dimensions, I said. The first one is exhaustion. Exhaustion is not only the physical, but the cognitive exhaustion. When you feel that at some point you feel that thinking hurts, that just planning some idea is enough, like to make you feel hurt or physical pain, start circles of anxiety only because you have in front of you a minor task that in the past it was extremely easy to accomplish for you. Maybe you're reaching a point when exhaustion is a problem. So the first dimension is the first component is exhaustion, cognitive, emotional, and physical exhaustion. The second one is related to what is called the self-inefficacy belief, which is very related with this expression of imposter syndrome, which is very common in our industry. This sensation of that you are not doing enough, and that sensation becomes a source of anxiety. Sometimes the sensation, the feeling of that you're not doing enough can be a good source of motivation to keep improving, to keep learning. But other times it is strong enough like to keep you away from enjoying the process of learning or enjoying the process of growing, So the second component of dimension is self-inefficacy belief. I'm not doing enough. The third one is cynicism. That cynicism means that mental distance that you have with what you're doing or with your company or the task in a way that you feel that you are not adding any value to the company or to the task you're doing, or the task you're doing is not adding any value to you. What I mean is essentially when you feel that when you start asking to yourself, why, because my French, but why the hell I'm doing this? Why if this is going nowhere? Okay. That kind of questions, when it happens isolated, it's not a problem. But when it's repeated all over the time, week over week, day after day, this is going to be a very important source of stress, and sustained over the time, it can become a very important problem in terms of burnout. And the last one is called depersonalization, very similar to cynicism, but in this case, the mental distance is not with the task or the company, but with the people surrounding you. Sometimes your customers, sometimes people in your team, another time just, the people from another department, At the beginning, some levels of depersonalization, and what is important around burnout is to keep in mind a couple of things. First, that burnout can go hand in hand with engagement. And this is very common in our industry. This is very common to find people surprised because they felt that they used to love the job they were doing. And then one day, burnout knocked the door. So what happened? What happened to me? I used to love this thing. And now I'm just considering to quit and to open a bar in the beach. So what happened to that? So, and the problem there is that burnout can go hand in hand with work engagement. So don't fail in the trap of only watching how excited I am about my own job, because even in those situations, if we don't manage our burnout risk well, we can go down into the direction of burnout. So far so good.
So far, so good. Now, you mentioned work engagement, and that goes hand by hand with burnout. So how do you define work engagement, which sounds to be kind of the opposite? How would you describe that one?
Okay, yes. They are complementary, and work engagement has different dimensions too that correlates really well as opposite dimensions of burnout. And it's exactly the positive experience of being fulfilled by your job. And I'm going to explain it in plain English. I mean, it's an experience where you feel that you as a person, as a comprehensive person, are growing by the kind of job that you're doing. And this is something that you are going to see with indicators like the kind of mental focus that you can have at the moment of developing a task, the sense of purpose, and the level of energy you have. If you feel that you lack energy, or if you feel that nothing, the job that you're doing doesn't generate to you a sense of purpose in the most deepest way, most likely thing is that this is going to affect your burnout somehow in the short term, you know. But what we need to do to understand about well-being in general is that at the end of the day, those levels of work engagement or burnout risk are always lagging indicators, are always because something happened before that. So if we are looking only to work engagement and burnout, we are going to lose the information about why those things are happening, or we are going to be always late. So if you step back to the very beginning of the research around stress, by the way, we all the humans are prepared to go into stress, you know? The problem is that we need to recover ourselves in the same proportion that we stress ourselves, which means that if you dedicate a lot of energy during your day, and at the end of the day, you don't have recovery activities or recovery mechanism to recover yourself in terms of your emotions, your cognitive, your strength, your energy, your physical energy, most likely thing is that this is going to kick off some mechanism like presence of cortisol in the blood that are going to start affecting your body, even your body. Not only your psychology is part of yourself, but your body. But what I want to say is that the very beginning of the research about burnout or stress in general, at the beginning it was called, in the 70s, it was called depression by exhaustion. Stress was related to an imbalance between demands and resources. And demands and resources are things that need to be balanced, or at least just as slightly unbalanced, but not highly imbalanced. I mean, if you feel that you are being demanded much more than the kind of resources that you have over the time, most likely thing is that you are going to fall into burnout. Quite the opposite. If you feel that the kind of demands that your job is asking from yourself and your resources are extremely high compared to them, most likely thing is that you are going to fall into burning out because you are extremely bored. Okay, you don't feel challenged. Right. You don't feel like this is going nowhere in terms of developing your own personal skills, etc., etc. So, and this kind of and this relationship between resources and demands is something that happens both at individual, at the team, and at the organizational level. So, the most important problem here, if you see burnout as a systemic problem, is to understand that many times demands are generated by your team, and maybe you're just generating some resources at the organizational level, or quite different. Or maybe demands or resources are generated at the team level, and maybe you have some self-demands at your personal level that makes you extremely difficult to balance the demands and resources, because at the personal level, maybe, I don't know, maybe we all have a lot of biases that affects you in a negative way, okay? So it doesn't, that's just to put it simple. If your manager is telling to you that, okay, JJ, I noticed that your self-efficacy is going up, but keep in mind that we are okay in terms of the accomplishment of what we planned for this sprint or the performance you're having. But you internally, you leave your own let's put this way, self-demandant, and you at some point suffer this bias of being extremely perfect,
Right.
Because I don't know, maybe
Perfectionism.
you were born in a home where being perfect was extremely important. Most likely thing is that the environment that your team is creating is not going to be enough, because internally you are going to be that you are not doing enough, no matter what others says. And it can be quite different. So and it can work in if you make any other combination. But that's what I'm saying here is, first, keep in mind that this is a game of resources and demands. And second one, it has every different levels: organizational level, team level, and the personal level.
Hmm. Marcos, this is bringing me so many questions. For example, let's start with this one. Um, you mentioned that the recovery should be in the same proportion as in how much energy we invested. And that is very simple. If I run a marathon, that's going to be tiring for the body, right? And therefore, after that, I really need to relax the body, hydrate, recover. Very easy to understand because the body hurts. But what about tech or knowledge workers? How does that exertion of effort happen at the cognitive level, and what does recovery mean in that way?
Okay. Well, the problem with humans is that compared to animals, we're not very efficient at the moment of the recovery in some situations.
Okay.
If a zebra sees a lion, most likely thing is that the zebra is going to start running a lot. It's going to feel a lot of stress, and a lot of blood is going to be distributed in a way to help that zebra to go faster. Once the zebra stopped seeing the lion, because I don't know, maybe the lion was too tired and didn't attract her. Once the zebra sees that there is not risk out there, she's going to stop, and the zebra is going to start eating again. Nothing happens. The circadian rhythm goes down, and everything is going to be in control again. Look what happened. We, the knowledge workers, we have a good planning, let's say a conflicted planning meeting today because we are planning our sprint, or because we had some problems because we had some incidents in production, but you knew it that those incidents were about to happen because you mentioned several times that we had all this and that technical debt and etc. Any of those moments generated a stressful situation to you, and you did your best effort to solve the problem. And at the end of the day, you say, okay, here's the thing, JJ. This is it for today. I'm going to start working on this problem tomorrow. But what happened? The problem is that we are not as smart as zebras. Most likely thing is that when you go to your home, your brain will keep working on that risk, even if that risk is not there looking at you with a lion's eye, because you perceive that the problem is still there,
Wow.
So the problem with recovery is that it's not linear in terms of the kind of control you can have. You need to train it. You need to set a lot of specific activities to be good at recovery. And recovery doesn't mean resting a lot. Sometimes that's a problem and you need to do that. And I'm not a specialist. I'm not a specialist on recovery, but research has proven that recovery many times has to do not only with resting, but the sense of control of your time. I mean, let's see the opposite situation. How many times do you consider, okay, did you plan, okay, this weekend I'm going to take a lot of time to rest, and then that's my case. Maybe my story, my wife asked me to do something on the garden, or someone needs something to do, and I needed to go to the grocery shop to buy some things, and then and this and that. And at the end of the weekend, I look back and say, okay, what happened there? My agenda took the control. Okay. So this is going to affect your recovery quality, the quality of your recovery. Another factor well known around the quality of the recovery process is the mastery, the sense of developing mastery. If
Mm.
you invest all your energy into your job, and after that you don't invest energy into new brain connections, most likely thing is that you are going to be perceiving that you are growing, or you are putting a lot of energy only in your job and nothing else. And
Mm.
this is going to affect also the quality of your recovery. So
Mm.
there are a lot of things around recovery, but what I want to stress here is that the idea of that, as you mentioned, recovery is a game of proportions, not only in quantity but also in quality.
Right.
But you also have a lot of experience on this topic. What is your take here?
Well, this sense of cognitive demands that we put on ourselves, for example, like you said, the mind does not stop. The mind does not stop working, which is unbelievable. Usually, I will get answers to my questions or to my problems in the shower, right, or while going on a walk, which means that something deeper is still working, but that's working at a different level, and it reminds me also, Marcos, of how much I struggled in the past with setting boundaries for my own recovery during the day. Even, something that I ended up doing is this experiment that I call the resting bubbles or rest bubbles, which means that 10 to 15 minutes during the day, I will set a rest bubble and I will just lay on the floor and do nothing, no inputs, no sensory inputs, nothing at all, not even music, not even meditation, no, just stay there. And that is what forced me to get into a relaxed nervous system and have a second round. But man, it was so difficult to do it because I think in my case I was so hardwired to do and do and do things which is not
Yeah.
the way to work, right?
Totally. From the clinical perspective, we don't talk too much about work life. Something that comes to my mind is that we don't talk too much about work life balance. I mean, many people speak about it, and I see that there is, which it is an important topic, but it is not researched a lot with that terms. But what do have a lot of research behind, it's the problem of it's the challenge of work-life impact, which is we don't assume that there is a balance between work and non-work related roles. But we know that there are a lot of impacts that can exist if you consider every single role that we all have in our lives. And the problem is always a problem that is going to be, I don't know. I mean, this is going to be a problem based on the boundaries you set, or it's going to be a positive reinforcement based on the boundaries you set. And one of the most important problems in work-life impact, related to work-life impact, is something called the invasive fatigue, which is, let me put an example. Do you know that those peoples that once they finish their job, no matter what they're doing, they start feeling excited. They start feeling energized because they are going to start work. They're going to their home to play with their children, or they are going to, I don't know, to play soccer with their friends, or they're going
Right.
to do their hobby or whatever they are going to do out of their job related tasks. But what in the parallel, you are going to see other people that after job, after the job, the time they are doing job, they're going to feel that they are just running out of energy and they just want to go to their home to rest. And they don't have energy enough, like to play with their children, to run their own hobby, and so they start postponing, etc., etc. So what happened with that people that even in exactly the same situation, the situation of finishing their job time, one of them feels excited, energized, and one of them feels totally, totally, totally fatigued. You know,
Protecting
so
brain.
what we need to learn is that boundaries need to be conceived not only as a limit, as a guardrail, but also as an open door, as a door. If you can open, and you are going to see that those boundaries are going to connect you with other stage in your day, or not. It's not stage, the word in English, but other dimension, if let's say, of your own personality, of your
Okay.
own day by day. So, and if you see like that, and that's the way that people frame when they are going to start connecting with their children, for instance. Okay, I'm so totally excited because we are going to do this and that with my wife or with my children. So, and then you see, okay, I envy that person. I'm just looking for to go to my home to lay on bed and maybe drinking a beer. Or what happened with me that it doesn't happen with that person? Well, that's the opportunity with boundaries. Not only consider boundaries as a limiting factor or as a guardrail, but also as a door connecting to another activities.
Thanks. That makes me also think, Marcos. When I was prepping for this interview, one of the previous interviews that you had, you talked about the work-life integration as well, right? And I don't know what's your take on this. In my case, for example, for years by leading tech teams, I used to tell them, guys, this is not a Clark Kent versus Superman double personality problem. No, it's not that you're gonna come and just take off your heroes uniform from one or hide the other one. But instead, we are more like an Iron Man. It's the same guy
Exactly.
with an armor or without the armor. How's your take on that?
I totally agree with that vision. I mean, we are always the same person. We're always the same person. I'm going to connect with Yerbo here. We created Yerbo essentially because we want to help people to have in their workplace a source of mental health. Because if your workplace, and this is the problem, burnout was normalized during a lot of times. It was like business as usual. If you work very hard, you're going to burn out. Okay, why? Why? I mean, I don't accept that. So my main idea at the moment of evaluating these problems of having two personalities is that why do we accept that model? The science says that you can't split your personalities unless you have some conditions, some basic conditions that most likely you don't have. Okay, but once you don't accept that, you are going to start looking for how can I do to create an environment in my team to become me as a person and to look places to work for, to companies to work for, where I can get not only a salary, a career, self-fulfillment, but also mental health for me and for the people surrounding me. Okay, because this can happen. And you're not going to get to that point unless you consider that you are always the same person, inside and outside your job.
No, that makes sense. I didn't think about that. Thank you so much. Now, Marcos, let's start getting into Yerbo's story, and then let's get into the tactics of these three levels that you mentioned. That is the individual, the team, and the organization. So, how did you come up with the idea, actually? Because, like you said, this inner project within Machinalis was maybe not even the core business of the company at that time, but you were able to figure this out. And then how did that lead into what's called Yerbo now?
Okay. Well, our main thesis is since the beginning of Yerbo was that, and I'm going to say this in a very pretentious way, it was that the industry of well-being was wrong, because most of the times the industry was only focusing to wellness as an end goal. And on the second time, most of the times, the industry was looking for to create solutions and to face the problem with top-down solutions, looking for to develop resources to HR and with centralized initiatives, huge initiatives. And as far as we know, when burnout knocks the door of HR, it is too late. It is because something didn't happen like a couple of months before. And a couple of months before, maybe it was just a matter of a conversation, only a conversation. And in our industry, we work in the tech industry, those conversations should happen in rituals that are very common, like the one-on-one conversations you have with your team leader, or the planning, or retrospective, or dynamics like those ones. So Yerbo was born once we realized that most of the resources were created with the people in mind that was far from where the problem was huge, you know? So that's our main starter and motivation at the beginning. We need to develop resources for the individual contributors, for the team leaders, for those dealing with those problems, for the people that are not only looking for to solve it because they are interested in becoming, for instance, better leaders, but also because they are facing all day long with the people struggling with the problem. If you are, I love the people from HR, but if you are in a big corporation, most likely thing is that you are going to look at the problem of well-being as a statistical problem. But for me, as a team leader, someone struggling with mental well-being has a name. It's a person. It's a real person with a real history, with a real family, you know? So it's much more easier to be empathetic, and you need empathy to start solving this at scale if you generate resources for those dealing with the problem in the trench of the company. That does make sense to you?
Yeah, that makes complete sense. Like you said, if we treat people as numbers, then we are actually creating depersonalization in the first place.
Yes, as a byproduct, yes, it's going to happen.
That's a byproduct. It is, right? So let me understand this. So what I'm understanding is that here, what you guys are doing is taking aspirational well-being and transforming that into practical well-being.
Yeah,
is that
totally,
something?
Totally, because something that happened in our history. For instance, the approach of Yerbo is going to help people, active teams, to decrease the level of burnout risk by an average of 40% after 6 months, which is a lot. If you consider the human and the economic impact, it's going to be a lot. But we learned that if you help teams to manage their well-being as an end goal, most likely thing is that once they stop struggling with mental well-being issues, for instance, like burnout, they're not going to feel motivated to keep working on that again. And from the sanitarian perspective, there are 3 different things you can do to solve mental health issues. Treatment, which is the most expensive one, and most of the companies focusing to hiring coachings or psychologists on demand, etc. And they are going to tackle this problem when it is too late and when you have someone that maybe is considering just to quit their own career as a developer. Early detection and early management and prevention. And prevention and early detection are going to happen in the trench of the company, are going to happen in the front line with the frontline workers, So what we want to do is to attach, and what we're doing is to attach the mental well-being management to those priorities living inside inside those teams. And that's when we figured out that our goal wasn't to solve burnout problem per se, but to help those teams to achieve high performance without burning out, to achieve high performance with mental well-being. Of course, we reject a lot of leaders all the time. We reject many of them because if you see, you're going to see that there are like two different types of leaders. I'm going to make it extreme and very dramatic. There are those transactional leaders looking for to extract value from the team and to put that into the organization and to gain a bonus, at the end of the quarter. Then there are others, non-transactional people that they are actively looking for to learn from their own mistakes to achieve high performance without burnout. Because they know that the main asset they have is the I don't know, at some point their name, their reputation they have in the team. And they do that because they really want to have a team they will love to work for. So what we're doing at the end of the day is to help those teams to achieve high performance without burning out. Of course, we have seen a lot of anti-patterns at scale, and we have been discussing a bit about it in our previous talks.
Mm-hmm. In regards to the patterns and anti-patterns, or let's call it best practices and anti-patterns, what would you say that are at the individual and team and then the organizational level best practices and anti-patterns? I know this can be a long answer, so go for it, and I will keep track of that.
So I'm going to select just some of them. I'm going to randomly, okay? But some common anti-patterns and very common ways of thinking about how to manage mental well-being at scale in our industry. First of all, as I mentioned, considering that well-being is a responsibility of HR or is a responsibility of the upper management. This is very common. And most common problem is that the most common manifestation of that anti-pattern is that you're going to see that when you speak to a company about what do you do in regard of mental well-being, they're going to tell you all the things they do to gather data. So using that data, they're going to change policies, which is very important. It is very important. If you see something happening on the entire company that is affecting the mental well-being of your company or the climate of your company, it's okay. Take act on it. Take actions. But it is not enough. If you consider that mental well-being, it's only a matter of HR, most likely thing is that you're going to have something that is not sufficient to solve the problem from the root causes. The second anti-pattern is those, I don't know if you, maybe some of the people in the audience is really aware of those big initiatives that commonly start every quarter, start with every, upper management team, This quarter, we are going to do this, and that, because this is going to solve that big problem. Mm-hmm. Another anti-pattern is to run it top down. Run it top down. What does it mean? Essentially, to make those initiatives mandatory. Another anti-pattern common in many companies is to see approaches that are one size fits all. Why are they anti-pattern? Because essentially the problems that, the sales team have, the triggers of burnout in the sales department are extremely different than the triggers in the support area. At the team and the personal level, another anti-pattern very common is to consider yourself as a hero, looking to solve every situation and to feel guilty if you didn't see it coming, which is going to affect not only the performance of your team to solve, to prevent, to detect early signals, but also it's going to affect your own mental well-being. In mental well-being management, no one is a hero, not even for yourself. Most of the times, you need to get support from others. Maybe in very, very simple things. I'm not talking about a specific crisis, but I'm just talking about our day-to-day. We need to get support from others. Mental well-being, to be effective, needs to be community-driven. So I don't know, and we can go deeper, but any of those resonates with you? Do you want to add any other?
Yes, I would like to go touch based on this one that is one size fits all. That I think is one of the most interesting ones because, like you said, this quarter we are going to have yoga for everyone, right?
Exactly,
You have the people
exactly.
that they do not move or that they do not fit to that realm. Or this quarter we're going to all of us meditate. But for some people, meditation equals suffering, let's say, right? And
Exactly,
for other ones, yay. So something that I
exactly.
was thinking about this, Marcos, is for example, I've been doing lots of nutrition experiments with myself, and because of that, I got my DNA decoded, my gut health discovered, explored, and so on, and then I got supplements that fit my specific DNA. Right. And even though, let's say that your body and my body are very similar, there are tiny differences that even if I give you, let's say, extra vitamin D, that's not going to work, but it may work for me. So we're getting into something that is called precision nutrition. Why precision?
Exactly.
Because it's precisely or personalized for you. So this, what you were saying that one size does not fit all, sounds to me that there is also this precision recovery,
Exactly.
which means that, right, for you, maybe meditation uh, may work greatly. For me, what I call contemplation, it's something different, like that rest bubble that I was saying. But that goes only through experimentation. Yeah, you can give me guidelines, but at the end of the day, as an individual, I will have to try out what works for me or how long, what's the dosage specifically for me. Does that
Totally.
go along those lines, individual?
Yeah, totally. I totally agree. And even more, you should keep in mind that most of the times we don't share. First, yoga for everyone. Maybe my problem is not about how I'm processing my own energy to come back to my axis and to start breathing, and which is very important. I do meditation myself, and I really believe in. I believe in the science behind mindfulness, and I share that, and this is part of my day to day. But maybe you are struggling with problems that are beyond yourself, and expecting that you are going to solve everything based on how do you process your reality and how do you manage your anxiety and how do you manage your own bias, your internal voices, when maybe you have a leader that is not sharing feedback to you. And it is very important because you are very concerned on on where your career is going. You're missing something extremely important that you are not going to solve with more yoga. So even if yoga is important for you at the personal level, at the team level, maybe you need some other things. And at an organizational level, even if you have a very good dynamics in your team, but you don't feel proud of your organization, you're not going to feel connected with the kind of task you're doing, even if you love the code you're writing, you know? So first of all, yoga for everyone is not a problem, and maybe it's not a solution that everyone has. There's no solution for a problem that everyone has. Even more, I'm totally sure this is not going to solve everything. So those big initiatives are an antipattern. And second one, we as a persons, we are all in different stages of awareness around our own mental well-being. And you can have people even denying the importance, how important is something for their own mental well-being. And you can have inside the same team, you can have other people totally convinced and aware and really practicing discovering what is triggering their own work engagement, for instance. So one size fits all is going to forget that kind of diversity you have in your team. And speaking about diversity, most likely thing is that those big initiatives are going to consider neurotypical people, which is another mental well-being antipattern. This is not something we can talk today, but what we see in our industry is a very important prevalence of neurodiverse teams, which means that why do you try to use a hammer all the time? Okay. Of course, there are good practices too, but I love the example you shared.
I was about to ask those ones. What are best practices at the team and organization level that you've seen and that you're also helping to implement through Yerbo?
Okay. Most of them have different implications on different flavors, but follow the same principle at some point. I'm going to be very generic, but essentially, one of the most important is use shared frameworks. Use a validator framework to create a shared language. This is beyond Yerbo. I mean, we see that the top systemic performers in terms of how to manage and create well-being promoters environments are very good at creating a shared language to describe how do we feel and what is happening to us. You know, so if you don't do that, what is going to happen? You are going to start listening someone saying all day, I'm burning out, and maybe that person is just exhausted. And then you're going to talk to another person close to you, and you're going to ask her, okay, how do you feel? And she's going to tell you, I'm okay. And maybe that person is just about to go into a crisis, and a very important crisis. So creating a shared language is not only the first step at the company, but also at the team level. But one thing very close to there is using a validator protocols, which is very far from the common reaction in HR teams. They most commonly they are going to or buy frameworks without scientific validation, or they're just going to reinvent the wheel, and they're going to start saying, okay, we are going to ask if people feels burned out. So they're going to ask you directly, do you feel burned out? Which is, by the way, a bad idea. Okay. Another good practice, best practice is go.
What makes it a bad idea to ask directly that question?
Because this is going to generate a lot of biases and a lot of it's going to backfire in terms of behaviors. One of the most common biases that you are going to generate asking so directly. I mean, asking directly is a very good opener for a conversation when you're talking one-on-one. But when you are measuring an organization and some of them in your organization feels like a depersonalized relationship with the company, most likely thing is that you're going to start perceiving some biases like social desirability bias, you know? This kind of bias is going to affect not only for if you have people depersonalized, but also if you have an environment without psychological safety. Because if I don't feel safe, to be honest, I'm going to start responding based on what I consider that you want to hear about my responses, or based on what I am assuming that is going to be the reaction that you're going to have based on my responses. So that's a common bias. It's called social desirability bias. But also, if you ask a person, do you feel burned out? And that person is not sharing, it doesn't have the same, I don't know, the same definition of what burnout means. That person is going to be responding based on their own definition. And you are going to start working on that problem the same way that the other person that maybe says, okay, I'm just exhausted. And maybe that person that says, I'm just exhausted, I'm a little bit tired, but it's normal. Not a big time. That's a common situation. You see, and that person, after a couple of months, going into an important crisis and reaching a burnout, a clinical burnout. You know, and asking that way is very common, and also generates other problems like ego defensive responses. If I have a personal problem with the person that is asking that, most likely thing is that I'm going to start protecting myself with my response. Another best practice is to, well, there is a Antipattern, which is trying to generate new rituals. We are going to create this workshop. We are going to create, workshop it's good as Kickstart, but if you want your people to start talking about mental health openly, and then you create new ceremonies, those
Mhm.
new ceremonies are going to demand a cognitive and emotional effort for people that feel that this is not their priorities. Okay, so this is going to be an extra effort. So a good practice, a best practice we see in top performance is that they build on top of existing ceremonies and rituals, which means team
Mhm.
leaders asking about, I don't know, some specific mental well-being challenges or the impact on the well-being of, I don't know, of a feature of something that we have been working on in the last sprint during the retrospective, during our planning, doing making it extremely intentional during the planning. We want to do X, Y, or Z during the planning in terms of the impact. I mean, building on top of existing rituals, it's something that we see as a very good practice. Another very common practice we see, and which is a very good recommendation, not also at an individual level and mostly for leaders, is to lead with example. I mean, to create a psychological safety place environment to speak about mental well-being, it is important to start with your own, sharing your own insight, sharing those insights that makes you vulnerable. That kind of vulnerability is going to generate a safe place because your people is going to feel, okay, it is safe to be open on how weak we are. Okay, and don't be mad if you don't see that people follow your example after the first time you do that, because the first times you do that, most likely thing is that some people are going to perceive is that you are doing that because you have some privileges. Okay, he's the
Mhm.
leader. Nothing wrong is going to happen to her because she is the manager. Okay, she can be really open. Okay, her career is not at risk. The another one is that it's very common in there is a common problem in companies that want to start working on this, is to start looking at the lagging indicators, as we mentioned before. Lagging indicators meaning what is the number of burnout. Okay, so we need to improve that indicator. Okay, so all the people going after that, and most likely thing is that managers are going to receive 1/3 of their bonus are going to be received if they change and improve the metrics on burnout, which, by the way, is a very good way to add a bias, you know, because I'm going to be biased toward the direction
Right.
of rating them
Conditions.
positively.
Right.
Exactly.
You're going to be conditioned, and with the reward to make that happen, that number happen, even to paying the price of getting people burned out, which is the funny
Exactly.
thing.
Exactly. Exactly. Totally. So the first of all is to stop looking for lagging indicators, at least in the initial stages, and to start looking for leading indicators. And this is important not only on the team level, organization level, but also individual level. What are the main reasons that makes me feel stressed or triggers my own specific, for instance, cynicism? I need to start working on those triggers. I need to look at the lagging indicators to keep on track what is the impact of the kind of actions I am taking, you know? And very related to this one, what we see in top performers is that they do focus into actions taken instead of data without context. I mean, you're going to see in one-on-one conversations people speaking about what actions does JJ take to improve their depersonalization problems instead of just
Mhm.
speaking about the depersonalization problem, because this is like a muscle. It's like the bubble that you
Mhm.
mentioned. It's a muscle. At the beginning, it's extremely hard to do that. So it is more important to gain cadence into generating this logic, this systemic and personal logic of looking for high performance with well-being instead of a trade-off. And at the beginning, it's more important the cadence than the final result. Does it resonate with you?
Yeah, it does very much. Do you have
Okay.
Do you have any other insight? So You started answering something that I was going to ask, which is how does a data science performant team behaves?
Yeah, cool. The- I'm going to tell you something that we learned from a huge
Sure.
team with that characteristics. They were really good at something that I was about to mention at the end. That was providing recognition. I mean, this is a matter of behavioral change at some point, and every cycle, every step they are doing in order to find how to overachieve their goals with mental well-being, they are extremely good at recognizing themselves. Their managers are
Wow.
really good at keeping track, even for because recognition is going to be like a shot of dopamines for every single step that you're doing. So, and you are very good at the moment of looking at that kind of and speaking about that kind of dynamics. So, when you want to start building on top of something that many times in those hyper growth companies feels like counterintuitive, which is how can we do some overachieve goals without burning out ourselves in the middle of the on our way? Every single time that you do something into that direction, no matter what the result is, recognition, self-recognition, team recognition. And this is the another problem. This is another best practice we have found, which is start at the team level. Start conversations from the team's perspective. If you have inside your team people that feels really confident on speaking with you in an open and vulnerable way, most likely thing is that that person is going to tell you, okay, I don't know what is happening with the team regarding, I don't know, the team coordination, but I can tell you what is happening with me that is making me to struggle with team coordination and is affecting my own depersonalization. But if you lack that psychological safety or that bonding with that person, most likely thing is that that person is going to use the team as a safe place to open the conversation. I think that maybe what is happening is that we're not realizing, well, that, this, and that. Okay? So an entry point, using the team as an entry point of conversation is always a safe place. Do you, that is fair to you?
Yeah, and actually, I'm super eager to increase the volume on some teams that I still lead on the reward part, when on true reward part, right? It's true recognition of what they are doing great.
Yeah,
Now,
and you can recognize specific behaviors. I mean, what you are not going to create something. You're not going to create a sustainable change over the time if you don't decentralize. Which is, by the way, one of the problems of the top down approaches. If you don't decentralize, if you don't help people to take agency of their own mental well being, because the company won't solve your mental well-being by giving you more ping pong tables the same way that you are not going to solve only your own mental well-being by doing yoga. Okay, there are those different levels, needs different levels of agency. And for instance, what this is something that you can reinforce with recognition. For instance, when someone in your team brings to the agenda of, for instance, to your one-on-one meeting, some topics that are specifically affecting their own mental well-being. That's our role as a leaders, to celebrate that, to recognize that, you know, to recognize even the effort. And by the way, something that we shouldn't do, something that it's very common for us to do is consider this situation. JJ comes to me to our one-on-one meeting. And JJ says, look, Marcos, this is happening to me. I've been struggling during the last couple of months with this. I was underperforming because this was affecting myself. I didn't like to speak about that because I wasn't sure about that. One of the common situations is to say, JJ, why you didn't come to me before? Okay? That initial reaction is going to bring you another new problem. not only a teammate suffering from something at a personal level, but also JJ feeling guilty because he
Right.
didn't share that with you before. So please just avoid to generate guilty on your team every time that they share something, which is very common.
Hmm.
You want to help him. You want to help JJ. Okay. You want
Right.
to help JJ. You're the most interested person in helping JJ, I guess. Well, the problem is it's a common reaction that makes people feel guilty. And that's one of the sources of the stigma of mental health. I don't know how to speak about it. I don't know how to open the conversation. So I will
Hmm.
postpone this until I see this is a real thing. You know?
Hmm. And that by that time, it's too late.
But that time it's too late. But that time is too
Hmm.
late.
Now, I know we are getting to the end of our conversation, Marcos. There is this question that I would like to get your insight about. So, I see, like you said, there are internal and external stressors, right?
Mm-hmm.
This game or balance between demands and resources, and we are imbalance. That's what can cause or bored out or burnout. Now,
Mm-hmm.
many of those internal stressors are our perceptions around specific situations. That, oh, I do not have enough time, or I'm not skillful enough, imposter syndrome, and so on.
Mm-hmm.
So now let's take from that those belief systems, let's say, from the individual to the organization or team levels, and what are empowering belief systems that you've seen in the high performers. What are they doing as a company, as an organization, differently than other ones? How's their mindset, in other words, as an organization?
At the belief system, I mean, at the belief of
Correct.
cognitive bias or cognitive traits or coping mechanisms.
Right.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
I think that the most important are related to this logic of being very consistent on this logic of generating awareness. And awareness is not just knowing something, but being connected to something. I mean, being conscious about where something is happening, when it's happening in myself, in my team, in being aware in the full sense of it. So they are very systematic on generating awareness and taking action in short periods of time based on that awareness. So this is the first coping mechanism we see at a team and organizational level, and they are very open to that, and which is not something common. I mean, most of the people listening this podcast are people really interested, really connected with this situation, with this type of the field of knowledge. But this is not the common situation. I mean, for most of the people speaking about this, in the best of the situation, in the best scenario, is just nice to have. It's not something that is a central component of the organization. So every time that you see a company, a CEO, speaking freely about his or her own mental health, what you're going to see is a good indicator of someone that feels free to speak about that publicly. And if that is sustained over all different levels of the organization, you are going to see a very good coping mechanism. This is very safe. This is a safe place to speak about mental health, you know? And one of the, you know, there is one of the cognitive traits is dramatization, to see everything as a drama, to see we didn't get our OKRs goals, we didn't get our OKRs this quarter, and once you mention that, once you share that explicit only that input into your company, you're going to see many different reactions. And then you're going to see people totally eager to start a new one because they want to accomplish that. Others saying, okay, that was because this quarter was awful, which is, by the way, a polarized thinking. And that people tend to see everything in black or white. And other people seeing like, okay, that means that we are going to break, we're going to bankruptcy, you know? one of the common coping mechanism I see systematically in organization is that they don't dramatize themselves. Okay, so and I think that maybe this is one of the most clearest one. They just see it as a part of the evolution at almost every level. What is your experience in terms of what have you seen in regarding this problem?
The healthiest companies that I've seen, Marcos, are teams, both teams and organizations. Like you said, they take care of people, and they take true care of people. They truly care for the well-being, emotional, physiological, and mental of their team members. They don't even call it employees. Starting from that point, they call it members. They call it something completely different. So even the language changes when you feel part of a whole, right? Not something like only a clog in the wheel. And the taking care, that is one of them. And the other one, the openness within the team to speak up from even personal problems that we may have that will affect us as a team, right? Because sometimes, I don't know, your kid got sick that morning and that you had an important presentation and you are the only one who can do that. No, now you have a team supporting you. So that creates that trust, that bond of trust that is watering the plant of a healthy environment. So those are the two aspects that I've seen out there.
Cool. Something I see as a common pattern is that they are extremely straightforward at the moment of sharing where they are. I mean, and straightforward doesn't mean to be lack of sensitiveness. It's just to be respectful of the time and to be respectful of the other person and to avoid obfuscating information. Being straightforward, it's like a required condition to create healthy environments. And now I'm thinking on our current customers, most of the people that are our top-notch leaders inside Yerbo, they are extremely straightforward at the moment of, and clear leaders at the moment of sharing what are they concerned of, for instance.
This is so interesting. Marcos, I have so many more questions because I know that we have only talked or touched the tip of the iceberg on what you guys are doing. So what time is it? Okay, we still have a few more minutes. I wanted to ask you now, what are common ways that, or how are the ways that you, Yerbo, are using data specifically on the day-to-day to innovate on how to operationalize or to put into practice this well-being techniques that we've been talking about?
Well, essentially what we do in Yerbo is not only to generate awareness on different topics around mental well-being. So week over week, we deliver some prompts that measure, as I mentioned before, in a validated way, the presence or absence of some specific indicators. Based on that information, we deliver instant feedback and actions recommended to the individual contributor, anonymize it in a safe way. That data anonymized goes to the team leader. But which is more important, using that data, we discover what are the most important pressing factors that person should be talking about in their one-on-ones. So we suggest them to include them in their one-on-ones, or at a team level, we suggest to the team manager, you should be speaking about these specific factors because we know using the data that if you don't do that now, they are going to become a larger problem in a couple of months. So essentially, we deliver data, we use data, we generate data and information and insights to reinforce that self-awareness process so people can keep track on their own mental well-being, they can improve it. But at the same time, we have the team manager to spot early problems before they become larger.
Wow.
In the short term, we're going to integrate. We have some integrations and people like GitLab is using Yerbo, and we have some integrations in place, which is your community is mainly from DevOps. Many users from the GitLab community started asking us, why don't you create the the well-being incidents management approach, which is, by the way, an integration between GitLab and Yerbo. So, for instance, this is just one use case. Based on your Yerbo levels, you can assign some tickets to someone. This is something that is going to happen the next quarter, but this is going to be more news coming soon. Stay tuned.
And we're going to put also the notes in the episode notes, the link to Yerbo and the Burnout IT calculator. And
Okay, cool.
we're getting to the end of the interview. Marcos, is there anything else that you would like to leave the audience with before I make my few last questions?
Okay, I'm doing this because I don't accept burnout as a business as usual. I'm doing this also because I live the experience of having a father that did accept this as a business as usual, and all our family was impacted because my father almost died because of burnout related symptoms.
Wow.
So if you have a personal story like mine, feel free to reach out to me, because at the end of the day, what I want to do is to create more mental health, and I believe that we can do that at scale. And I believe that the common approaches are wrong. So I want to learn from people interested into solving this into the tech industry at first. So my invitations in summary is reach out to me. I live and breathe feedback and conversations with people to learn from there. Yerbo is full of people with PhDs and things like that. I'm just a person that facilitates their job. And at the end of the day, even when we are very good at creating products or doing behavioral science research, we need to connect more and more and more with our community, because they know what is the product, what is the solution they are looking for. So my invitation is just reach out to me. I'm looking forward to speak with you.
Thank you, Marcos. Where can we find you on the net?
And on Twitter, you can. My handle is at Marcos Sponton. Maybe you can share at the end of the talk.
Yep.
That's it.
Perfect. I'll put those notes as well on the episode. Now, the last question for you, Marcos, it is, if you could leave the audience with a question to optimize their performance and also prevent burnout, what would that question be?
Are you proud? Are you proud of what you're doing? Proudness is one of the main predictors of work engagement without burnout. So take a look at the feeling of the question of if you feel proud of what you are doing, how you're doing, with what people you're doing that, etc. Proudness is a very good lead indicator.
Thank you so much, Marcos. I would double down on that one. That makes complete sense. Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it.
Okay, thank you so much, JJ.
It was my pleasure, Marcos. And to the audience, thank you so much for joining us in this conversation. If you guys enjoyed this conversation with Marcos Sponton from Yerbo, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to receive notifications for upcoming interviews. That's all for today. So keep learning, keep optimizing. See you soon.